Deep beneath the Earth's surface, in a coffin equipped with state-of-the-art technology, something extraordinary unfolded. Something that would challenge everything we thought we knew about death. A team of scientists dared to ask what truly happens in those first moments after burial. What they discovered would shake the foundations of science, consciousness, and our understanding of reality itself. This isn't just another ghost story or internet legend. This is the true account of James Porter, the quiet librarian who volunteered to let cameras record his final journey, and the astonishing phenomena that followed. Are you ready to question everything you believe about death?
Throughout history, people have wondered about what really happens inside a coffin after burial. It wasn't just scientists who were curious. Everyone from gravediggers to regular folks found themselves thinking about those silent moments beneath the earth. After all, death was the one experience that connected every living person. Yet no one could tell us what came next. It has always been like this. Strange stories began popping up from cemeteries around the world. Cemetery workers talked about weird noises coming from fresh graves. Maintenance teams noticed their equipment going haywire near certain burial spots. While most people brushed these off as scary stories, others weren't so sure. There seemed to be something more going on beneath the surface. Things got even more interesting when modern equipment started picking up odd readings in graveyards. Machines meant to check if the ground was stable found unusual energy patterns. Temperatures changed in ways that didn't make sense, and strange sounds showed up on recordings. These weren't ghost stories. These were actual measurements that no one could explain. The mystery kept growing. Funeral home workers started sharing their own stories. Security cameras caught unexplained movements. Electronic devices would act strangely in certain rooms. While these could have been coincidences, they added another piece to the puzzle. Sometimes graves had to be moved for construction or other reasons. When workers opened certain coffins, they found weird markings inside, scratches and patterns that shouldn't have been there. Some people said these marks proved something was happening after burial, while others tried to find normal explanations. But nobody could say for sure what caused them. This wasn't just about science anymore. People started asking bigger questions about life and death. Religious leaders talked about spirits. Scientists wondered if consciousness worked differently than we thought. Everyone had their own ideas, but nobody had real answers. By the time the 21st century rolled around, technology had gotten good enough to properly look into these mysteries. New cameras could see in complete darkness. Sensitive equipment could detect the smallest changes in temperature and movement. Scientists could even get information from devices buried underground. As more people talked about these mysteries online and in science magazines, a simple question kept coming up. What were we really afraid of finding? Were we scared of learning the truth about death? Or were we afraid that everything we thought we knew about life and death might be wrong? Rich research groups started getting interested. Anonymous donors offered money to study what was happening. What was once considered a crazy idea was becoming something serious scientists wanted to investigate. Around the same time, scientists studying how the brain works were making interesting discoveries. They started thinking that maybe consciousness, our awareness, and thoughts didn't just stop suddenly when we died. This gave researchers a new way to study what happened after death, without seeming completely unscientific. Everything was ready for someone to take a serious look at this mystery. They had the right tools, some good theories, and enough money to do it properly. All they needed was a plan that would help them find real answers. But this wasn't going to be easy. Someone would have to be brave enough to look beyond what most people thought was possible. As it turned out, a group of scientists was already working on something that would change how everyone thought about death. What made these researchers willing to cross lines that had stopped others for so long? And how would their search for answers lead them to uncover something far stranger than anyone could have imagined? The scientific proposal that would change everything began on a gloomy autumn evening at Riverside Research Institute. A group of researchers, tired of theoretical discussions and endless debates, decided it was time to take action. Led by Dr. Eleanor Hartman, a renowned expert in death studies, the team gathered in a dimly lit conference room to discuss what many considered unthinkable: placing a camera inside a coffin to document what happened after burial. Dr. Hartman wasn't what most people pictured when they thought of a scientist studying death. With her warm smile and gentle demeanor, she looked more like someone's favorite aunt than a groundbreaking researcher. But beneath her friendly exterior lay an unwavering determination to understand life's greatest mystery. The initial proposal faced immediate resistance. Even before the team could present their full plan to the Institute's board, word leaked out. Senior researchers called it reckless. Ethics committees labeled it disturbing. Religious groups sent letters of protest before the ink on the proposal had dried. But Dr. Hartman and her team had anticipated this reaction. They'd spent months carefully crafting their approach, consulting with experts from various fields: engineers who could design specialized equipment, psychologists who could address the mental impact, and ethicists who could help navigate the moral complexities. The team's core members brought unique perspectives to the project. Dr. Michael Chen specialized in advanced imaging technology. Sarah Patel was an expert in data analysis. James Rodriguez had 20 years of experience in forensic science. Each member added another layer of expertise to what was quickly becoming the most ambitious death study ever attempted. Their proposal went far beyond simply placing a camera in a coffin. They planned to create what they called a smart coffin, equipped with sensors to measure temperature, pressure, electromagnetic fields, and even quantum fluctuations. The data would stream continuously to a secure facility where teams of scientists would monitor every reading 24 hours a day. The cost estimates were staggering. Building the specialized equipment alone would require millions. Then there were the facilities, the staff, the security measures, and countless other expenses. Traditional funding sources backed away quickly, unwilling to associate their names with such a controversial project. Things took an unexpected turn when an anonymous donor contacted Dr. Hartman. The message was simple: unlimited funding in exchange for complete access to the data. The donor's identity remained hidden behind layers of legal documents and offshore accounts, adding another mystery to an already intriguing project. Security became a major concern. The team received threats from various groups, some claiming to protect religious values, others worried about disturbing forces beyond human understanding. Armed guards were posted at the lab, and team members were advised to vary their routes to work. But the most challenging aspect wasn't the technical details or even the security concerns. It was finding a way to conduct the experiment that respected both scientific rigor and human dignity. The team spent countless hours developing protocols that would protect not only their data, but also the sanctity of death itself. Dr. Hartman insisted on transparency with the public, holding open forums to discuss the project. These meetings often turned heated, with passionate arguments both for and against the research. Yet something unexpected emerged from these confrontations. People began sharing their own stories of unexplained events around death, adding to the team's determination to find answers. The media caught wind of the project, dubbing it the Death Camera Experiment. Headlines ranged from sensational to skeptical, but all agreed on one thing: this was unprecedented. Scientists from around the world began reaching out, some offering support, others warning of dire consequences. As the project developed, the team faced another unexpected challenge: the psychological impact on themselves. Many reported strange dreams. Others found themselves grappling with their own mortality in new ways. Dr. Hartman arranged for regular counseling sessions, understanding that they were venturing into territory that could affect them deeply. Technical challenges mounted as well. The camera system needed to function flawlessly in complete darkness, maintain power for extended periods, and transmit data through several feet of Earth. The engineering team worked through countless prototypes, each failure bringing them closer to a solution. The first breakthrough came when they successfully tested the transmission system in simulated burial conditions. For 48 hours, crystal-clear images and data streamed from 6 feet underground. The team celebrated this small victory, knowing they were one step closer to their goal. Legal hurdles proved equally challenging. New protocols had to be created, as no existing frameworks covered this type of research. The team's lawyers worked overtime, drafting documents that would protect everyone involved while still allowing the science to proceed. In the end, Dr. Hartman's team produced a 3,000-page proposal that addressed every conceivable aspect of the experiment. It detailed the technical specifications, ethical guidelines, safety protocols, and emergency procedures. Nothing was left to chance. As the final preparations began, a sense of destiny settled over the team. They knew they were about to attempt something that could fundamentally change humanity's understanding of death. As Dr. Hartman often reminded them, they weren't just conducting an experiment. They were opening a door that had remained closed throughout human history. But first, they needed something that no amount of money or scientific expertise could guarantee. They needed a volunteer, someone willing to be their subject, to allow their final moments and whatever came after to be recorded for the advancement of human knowledge. Finding such a person would prove to be an adventure all its own. Little did they know that their perfect candidate was already making his way toward them, drawn by forces that even their sophisticated equipment couldn't measure. Their paths were about to cross in ways that would reshape not just their understanding of death, but of life itself. James Porter's story began in the quiet town of Millbrook, where he spent 32 years working as the head librarian. His life had been ordinary in the most extraordinary ways. He could name every regular visitor to his library, remembered which books they borrowed, and kept track of their reading journeys through the years. His colleagues often joked that he was more computer than human when it came to remembering details about his beloved books and their readers. Life had blessed James with simple joys. His small house on Maple Street boasted a garden that was the envy of the neighborhood. Every morning he tended to his prized roses before heading to work, and every evening he returned to share dinner with his wife Margaret and their 2 teenage children, Emma and Thomas. The diagnosis came on a Tuesday afternoon, stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors spoke in gentle tones about time frames and options, but James heard the truth behind their carefully chosen words. 3 to 6 months, they said. He accepted the news with the same quiet dignity that had characterized his entire life. What happened next surprised everyone who knew him. Instead of retreating into grief or anger, James began what he called his final catalog, a detailed documentation of his remaining days. He kept meticulous notes about his experiences, his thoughts, and most importantly, his observations about the approaching end. As a librarian, he had spent his life organizing information for others. Now he wanted to organize information about death itself. Margaret struggled to understand her husband's newfound obsession. She found his notebooks filled with observations about how his body was changing, his thoughts on consciousness, and questions about what might lie beyond. Some pages contained detailed sketches of what he imagined the transition from life to death might look like. Others held poetry about the nature of existence. His children reacted differently to their father's unusual approach. Emma, 16 and fiercely intelligent like her father, engaged with his questions and theories. They spent long evenings discussing philosophical concepts about life and death. Thomas, 14 and more emotionally sensitive, found it harder to accept his father's analytical approach to dying. It was during one of his regular treatments that James first heard about Dr. Hartman's project. A nurse, knowing of his interest in documenting his experience, mentioned the controversial experiment. Instead of showing the revulsion or fear that most people expressed, James's eyes lit up with genuine curiosity. That evening, he did something unprecedented. He broke his usual quiet routine and called an emergency family meeting. Gathering his loved ones in their cozy living room, surrounded by walls of books he'd collected over decades, James shared his intention to volunteer for the experiment. Margaret's coffee cup shattered on the hardwood floor. Emma sat in stunned silence. Thomas ran from the room in tears. But James remained calm. explaining his reasons with the same patient tone he had used countless times to guide readers to the perfect book. This was his chance, he said, to turn his death into something meaningful, to contribute to humanity's understanding of its greatest mystery. The following weeks brought intense family discussions. Margaret alternated between anger and despair. How could he think of turning his final moments into a scientific spectacle? Emma researched the project obsessively, presenting her findings during family dinners. Thomas simply withdrew, spending more time in his room with his headphones on. James's decision attracted attention beyond his family. His colleagues at the library were divided. Some admired his courage, while others questioned his sanity. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the quiet librarian who volunteered to have his death recorded for science. Letters poured in, some supporting his choice, others begging him to reconsider. The town itself seemed to split into factions. The regular library patrons defended James, speaking of his lifelong dedication to knowledge and learning. Religious leaders in the community expressed concern about the spiritual implications of his decision. The weekly town council meeting turned into a heated debate about the ethics of the experiment. Through it all, James maintained his characteristic serenity. He continued his work at the library, though now he spent more time in the science section, reading everything he could find about death, consciousness, and the possibilities that lay beyond traditional understanding. His notebook filled with new observations, but now they included questions he hoped the experiment might answer. His health continued to decline, but his resolve grew stronger. During his initial meeting with Dr. Hartman's team, James surprised them with his extensive knowledge of their project and his thoughtful questions about the technical aspects. He wasn't just volunteering his death. He was approaching it as a collaboration between subject and scientists. Margaret finally came to accept her husband's decision after finding one of his notebooks open on his desk. The entry read, "In all my years helping people find the right books, I've learned that every story matters. Every perspective adds to our understanding. Maybe my story can help others understand the greatest mystery of all." As the day of the experiment approached, James focused on preparing his family. He recorded videos for future birthdays and anniversaries. He wrote letters to be opened at significant moments in his children's lives. He organized his beloved book collection, leaving detailed notes about why he had chosen each volume and what it had meant to him. The town librarian had become something more, a bridge between the world of the living and whatever lay beyond. His quiet courage inspired others to think differently about death, to see it not just as an ending, but as a potential doorway to understanding. The final weeks brought an unexpected peace to the Porter household. The arguments had ceased, replaced by a deep appreciation for their remaining time together. Even Thomas began to understand, in his own way, asking questions about his father's decision and listening intently to the answers. As James prepared for his role in the experiment, his story spread beyond Millbrook. People from around the country sent letters sharing their own experiences with death and loss. His small-town library became a focal point for a much larger conversation about mortality, science, and the human desire to understand what lies beyond. Now, as the day of the experiment drew near, James Porter, the quiet librarian from Millbrook, stood ready to make his final contribution to human knowledge. His journey from catalog cards to scientific subjects represented something profound about the human spirit. The endless desire to learn, to understand, and to leave something meaningful behind. The next phase would test not just scientific boundaries, but the limits of human courage and family love. As the research team made their final preparations, they knew they had found more than just a volunteer. They had found someone who understood, perhaps better than any of them, the true significance of what they were about to attempt. The preparation phase began in a converted warehouse on the outskirts of town. The research team transformed the stark industrial space into a state-of-the-art monitoring facility, filling it with screens, sensors, and enough computing power to run a small city. Every detail required careful consideration. from the specialized camera equipment to the exact composition of soil that would surround the coffin. The coffin itself underwent countless revisions. The team started with a traditional wooden design, but quickly realized they needed something far more sophisticated. The final version featured a carefully concealed network of sensors built into its walls. The wood came from a single ancient oak tree, chosen specifically for its unique properties that allowed for better signal transmission. Dr. Chen spent weeks perfecting the camera system. The device needed to operate flawlessly in complete darkness while transmitting clear images through several feet of earth. After 17 failed prototypes, she finally created a camera small enough to be unobtrusive, yet powerful enough to capture the slightest changes in the coffin's interior. The monitoring room took shape like a mission control center. Banks of screens lined the walls, each dedicated to different aspects of the experiment. One wall displayed vital signs and environmental readings, another showed multiple camera angles, and a third presented real-time data analysis. The team nicknamed it the Watch, as it would become their window into the unknown. Power supply posed another crucial challenge. The equipment needed to run continuously without any possibility of failure. The solution came in the form of a revolutionary battery system, one that could last for months without needing recharge. The technology was so advanced that several major tech companies had already expressed interest in acquiring it for other applications. The soil composition required special attention. Dr. Patel developed a unique mixture that would allow for optimal signal transmission while maintaining the natural properties of Earth. Each layer was carefully tested and calibrated. The team even created a special device to measure the precise density and moisture content of each layer as it was placed around the coffin. Security measures grew increasingly elaborate as the project progressed. The team installed a triple redundant data backup system. Every piece of information would be simultaneously recorded on servers in 3 different locations. They weren't taking any chances with losing even a second of observation. Environmental controls proved particularly challenging. The team needed to maintain stable conditions inside the coffin while allowing for natural processes to occur. They developed a sophisticated ventilation system that would prevent any contamination of the experiment while ensuring accurate readings. The communication system underwent rigorous testing. They buried test units at various depths, subjecting them to different weather conditions and soil compositions. Each failure led to improvements. Each success brought them closer to their goal. By the final phase of testing, they could maintain a clear signal through 20 feet of Earth, far more than they would need. Calibrating the sensors demanded incredible precision. The equipment needed to detect the slightest changes in temperature, pressure, electromagnetic fields, and dozens of other variables. Each sensor underwent hundreds of hours of testing in simulated conditions. The team worked around the clock, fine-tuning each component until it performed flawlessly. The data processing systems represented another breakthrough. Custom software analyzed the incoming information in real time, flagging any anomalies for immediate review. The program could detect patterns too subtle for human observation, ensuring that nothing would escape their notice. Medical equipment stood ready in a separate room, though everyone hoped it wouldn't be needed. The team had prepared for every contingency, including the possibility of having to terminate the experiment early. Emergency protocols were established, tested, and refined until every team member could recite them from memory. The recording systems incorporated cutting-edge technology from various fields. Audio equipment sensitive enough to pick up the faintest whisper sat alongside thermal imaging cameras that could detect temperature variations of less than 1 degree. Motion sensors could register movement smaller than a grain of sand. Storage solutions presented their own unique challenges. The amount of data they expected to collect would fill traditional systems within hours. The team developed new compression algorithms specifically for the project, allowing them to capture every detail without overwhelming their storage capacity. Backup power systems filled an entire room. Multiple generators stood ready to take over if the main power failed. The switch would be instantaneous. Not even a millisecond of data would be lost. The team ran weekly drills, simulating various types of power failures to ensure their systems would respond perfectly. The lighting setup required special consideration. While the interior of the coffin would be dark, The team needed to ensure their infrared systems wouldn't interfere with any natural processes. They developed a new type of non-invasive illumination that would allow them to observe without affecting the environment they were studying. Weather protection became another crucial factor. The team constructed a special shelter over the burial site, designed to protect their equipment from the elements while appearing completely natural to outside observers. The structure incorporated advanced materials that wouldn't interfere with their readings. The final phase of preparation focused on the human element. The monitoring team underwent specialized training, learning to interpret the massive amount of data they would soon be receiving. They practiced with simulated scenarios, preparing themselves for anything they might encounter during the actual experiment. As the completion date approached, the facility hummed with anticipation. Years of research, millions in funding, and countless hours of work had led to this moment. Equipment stood ready, systems had been checked and rechecked, and contingency plans were in place for every conceivable situation. The team had created something unprecedented, a window into what had always been hidden. Now, as they made their final adjustments and ran their last checks, they could only wonder what that window would reveal. The next phase would take them beyond preparation and into actual observation, where all their careful planning would be put to the ultimate test. Dawn broke over Millbrook Cemetery with an unusual stillness. The morning fog clung low to the ground, weaving between the headstones like ghostly fingers. The research team had arrived hours earlier, setting up their equipment under the cover of darkness to avoid drawing attention. Their movements were precise, rehearsed, each person knowing their role in what would become a historic moment. The burial site itself looked deceptively ordinary, a perfect rectangle cut into the earth, its walls smooth and precise. But beneath the surface lay a network of sensors and cables, all carefully concealed within the soil. The team had spent the previous night running final diagnostics, their hushed voices carrying across the empty cemetery as they confirmed each system was functioning perfectly. Local law enforcement established a perimeter around the cemetery, keeping curious onlookers and protesters at a safe distance. The media presence was minimal, a condition the Porter family had insisted upon. Only 2 journalists were allowed on site, chosen specifically for their reputation for handling sensitive subjects with respect. Margaret Porter arrived just as the sun began burning away the morning mist. She wore a simple black dress, her silver hair pulled back neatly, her face a mask of composed dignity. Emma and Thomas walked on either side of their mother, their young faces showing a mixture of grief and determination. The family had chosen to hold a private service the day before, allowing this moment to focus solely on the scientific aspects of James's final contribution. Dr. Hartman met them at the cemetery gates, her usual lab coat replaced by a dark suit that seemed to reflect the solemnity of the occasion. The research team stood respectfully aside as the family approached the burial site, giving them a moment of privacy before the proceedings began. The coffin arrived in a specially modified hearse, its precious cargo representing months of preparation and technological innovation. As it was carefully removed, the morning sun caught the polished wood, revealing the nearly invisible seams where sensors had been integrated into its structure. To any casual observer, it appeared completely ordinary, exactly as the team had intended. The pallbearers moved with practiced care, their steps measured and slow. Each person had been specifically chosen and trained for this task, understanding the delicate nature of the equipment concealed within the coffin's walls. They placed it on the lowering device with precision that spoke of countless rehearsals. Margaret stepped forward, placing a single white rose on the coffin's lid. This unplanned gesture caught the research team off guard, but their equipment was sophisticated enough to work around such small variables. The rose would become part of their observations, an organic element in their carefully controlled experiment. The actual lowering process took exactly 7 minutes. Each inch of descent was carefully monitored, with the team watching their instruments for any sign of disruption to their sensitive equipment. The cables and sensors, designed to uncoil naturally during the lowering, performed exactly as intended. As the coffin descended, a soft humming filled the air, the sound of dozens of systems coming fully online. The team monitored their tablets, confirming that data was flowing properly from each sensor. The camera feed appeared on their screens, showing the interior of the coffin in perfect clarity, despite the growing darkness as it descended. The soil replacement process began with mechanical precision. Each layer was carefully measured and tested before being added, ensuring optimal conditions for signal transmission. The team had developed a special mixture that would maintain consistency while allowing their equipment to function properly. As each layer was placed, sensors confirmed proper density and moisture levels. Throughout the process, Emma stood beside the grave, her tablet discreetly displaying the same data the research team was monitoring. Her father had specifically requested that his daughter be included in this aspect of the experiment, knowing her scientific mind would appreciate understanding what was happening beyond the visible surface. Thomas chose to focus on supporting his mother, who stood with quiet grace as the grave was filled. He had come to terms with his father's decision in his own way, finding peace in the knowledge that this was exactly what James had wanted. The young man's presence provided a reminder of the human element in this scientific endeavor. The final layers of soil were placed just as the sun reached its zenith. The research team's instruments showed all systems functioning perfectly. Temperature sensors responded correctly, pressure gauges showed expected readings, and the camera feed remained crystal clear. Years of planning had culminated in this moment of flawless execution. Dr. Hartman performed one last check of the monitoring equipment before addressing the family. Her words were few, but carried the weight of the moment's significance. The team withdrew to their monitoring station, leaving the family alone for their final moments at the graveside. Margaret lingered longest, her hand resting on the fresh earth. She whispered something too quiet for anyone to hear, a private message between wife and husband. When she finally turned away, her face showed a complex mixture of grief and pride, understanding that her husband's last act would contribute to human knowledge in a way few others had. The cemetery gradually emptied as afternoon approached. The research team retreated to their monitoring facility, their screens now showing a steady stream of data from beneath the earth. The family returned home to begin their new reality. The media representatives departed to file their carefully worded reports. Only the security team remained visible, maintaining their discreet presence around the perimeter. But beneath the surface, countless sensors, cameras, and instruments kept their tireless watch, waiting to record whatever might unfold in the hours and days to come. The burial phase had ended, but the true experiment was just beginning. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the cemetery, the monitoring team settled in for their first night of observation. None of them could have predicted the extraordinary events that would unfold in the hours ahead. The first hours of observation unfolded in the monitoring facility with an almost anticlimactic quietness. The research team sat before their screens, watching streams of data flow in from the buried coffin. The gentle hum of computers provided a steady backdrop to their vigil, broken only by the occasional murmur of technical observations and the soft tapping of keyboards. Dr. Hartman maintained her position at the central monitoring station, her eyes fixed on the main display. The infrared feed showed the coffin's interior with remarkable clarity. Every fold in the fabric lining, every subtle shadow stood out in sharp detail. The auxiliary screens displayed a constant flow of environmental data, temperature, pressure, electromagnetic readings, and dozens of other measurements that painted a complete picture of conditions within the burial space. The early readings followed expected patterns. The temperature inside the coffin gradually stabilized as the freshly packed earth settled. Moisture levels fluctuated slightly as the soil adapted to its new configuration. These were normal, predictable changes that the team had anticipated during their months of preparation. 4 hours into the observation, the first unexpected reading appeared. A slight fluctuation in the electromagnetic field surrounded the coffin. Nothing dramatic, but noticeably different from their baseline predictions. Dr. Chen noted the anomaly in her log, though she maintained a measured skepticism about its significance. Scientific observation required patience and careful documentation, not hasty conclusions. The atmosphere in the monitoring room shifted subtly as evening approached. The day shift began preparing detailed notes for the night team, ensuring continuity of observation. Coffee cups accumulated on desks, and the initial tension of the morning gave way to a focused alertness. Every screen remained under constant surveillance, each team member watching for the slightest deviation from expected parameters. 6 hours after burial, the pressure sensors detected a minor change. The variation was small, barely registering on their scales, but it followed an unusual pattern. Instead of the gradual shifts they expected from settling soil, these changes occurred in regular intervals, almost like a pulse. Dr. Patel spent 30 minutes verifying the equipment's calibration before confirming the reading was accurate. The audio sensors, designed to detect even the faintest sounds, picked up their first notable recording 7 hours into the observation. A soft, barely perceptible vibration that didn't match any known underground source. The sound analysis team isolated the frequency, comparing it against their database of geological and mechanical noise patterns. It didn't match any known profile. The temperature readings began showing subtle anomalies during the 8th hour. Small localized cold spots appeared within the coffin, moving in patterns that defied normal thermodynamic behavior. These variations were minimal, less than a degree, but their movement suggested an active process rather than passive temperature distribution. 9 hours into the observation, the camera feed captured its first truly inexplicable event. A shadow, barely visible even with their advanced imaging system, moved across the upper corner of the coffin. The movement lasted less than a second, but it was recorded simultaneously by 3 different camera angles, ruling out equipment malfunction. The research team maintained their professional composure, but an undercurrent of excitement began building in the facility. They had expected the first day to yield nothing but baseline readings as the burial environment stabilized. Instead, they found themselves documenting phenomena that challenged their understanding of normal physical processes. Dr. Hartman ordered a complete systems check at the 10-hour mark. Every piece of equipment was tested and recalibrated. The data streams were verified against redundant backups. The team needed to ensure that what they were observing wasn't the result of technical glitches or environmental interference. The verification process confirmed their equipment was functioning perfectly, which made the continuing anomalies even more significant. The electromagnetic fluctuations had settled into a regular pattern. The pressure variations maintained their pulse-like rhythm. The temperature anomalies became more pronounced, though still subtle enough that less sophisticated equipment would have missed them entirely. Sarah Patel, working at her station near the back of the facility, developed a program to correlate the various anomalies. Her analysis revealed a surprising pattern. The electromagnetic fluctuations, pressure changes, and temperature variations weren't occurring randomly. They showed signs of synchronization, suggesting a connected process, rather than isolated events. As the first 12 hours drew to a close, the observation team compiled their initial report. The document was clinical and precise, detailing each recorded anomaly with scientific detachment. But between the lines of technical language lay an undeniable truth. They were witnessing something unprecedented. The night shift arrived as planned, receiving detailed briefings from the day team. Dr. Hartman remained at her post, unwilling to leave while the readings continued their mysterious patterns. The facility settled into its overnight rhythm, screens glowing in the dimmed light as the vigil continued. None of the researchers gave voice to the growing feeling that hung in the air, a sense that they stood on the brink of something momentous. Their training demanded they maintain scientific objectivity, but their instincts told them that what they were observing defied conventional explanation. As midnight approached, the facility's sophisticated equipment continued its unwavering watch, ready to record whatever might emerge from the darkness beneath the earth. The first hours had yielded more questions than answers, but they had also confirmed one certainty. The boundary between known and unknown was far more permeable than anyone had imagined. The next phase of observation loomed ahead, promising to challenge not just their scientific understanding, but their fundamental beliefs about the nature of death itself. The quiet beeping of monitors and soft whir of computers became the heartbeat of their vigilance, marking time as they waited to see what other mysteries the night would reveal. The unexplained phenomena began subtly at first. like whispers in the dark. Shortly after midnight, the monitoring equipment detected a series of vibrations that traveled through the coffin's walls, not from the outside in, as might be expected from settling Earth, but from the inside out. The pattern resembled finger taps, though there was no visible movement on the camera feeds to explain their source. These vibrations grew stronger over the next few hours, forming a distinct rhythm that the audio analysis team struggled to classify. The sound didn't match any known geological patterns, nor did it fit with the expected noises of decomposition or soil settlement. The tapping seemed almost deliberate, following a sequence that repeated every 7 minutes. The research team maintained their scientific discipline, methodically recording and analyzing each new phenomenon. But their careful notes couldn't hide the growing sense that they were witnessing something unprecedented. A systematic breakdown of the barriers between known and unknown. The laws of physics themselves seemed to be bending within the confines of that buried space. Dr. Hartman ordered new protocols as the phenomena increased in frequency and intensity. Each event was now cross-referenced against multiple data streams, seeking patterns that might explain the inexplicable. The team developed new classification systems on the fly, attempting to categorize manifestations that defied conventional scientific understanding. As dawn approached, the phenomena showed no signs of diminishing. Instead, they began exhibiting signs of organization, as if building towards something. The random patterns became more structured, the chaotic energies more focused. Whatever was happening in that coffin, it was no longer simply a series of disconnected events. It was evolving into something more. The monitoring facility hummed with tension as the team watched their instruments record the impossible. They stood at the edge of discovery, witnessing events that would reshape humanity's understanding of death, consciousness, and reality itself. But even as they documented each new phenomenon, a deeper awareness grew. They weren't just observing these events. They were participants in something far more profound than any of them had imagined. The mist emerged like a whisper made visible, first appearing as a faint haze near the corners of the coffin. At first, the research team assumed their camera feeds were malfunctioning. Condensation was a common issue with buried equipment. But when Dr. Chen adjusted the imaging filters, the true nature of what they were seeing became apparent. This was no ordinary water vapor. The mist possessed qualities that defied natural explanation. It moved against convection currents, forming shapes and patterns that suggested conscious direction. Its color shifted through shades that didn't quite match any known spectrum, sometimes appearing almost luminescent, other times seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. What secrets lay within those ethereal tendrils that danced before their eyes? The question hung in the air as the research team watched the mist begin to take form. As the substance accumulated, it developed distinct characteristics. Unlike normal fog or vapor, this mist maintained its cohesion, never dissipating or mixing with the air around it. It moved with purpose, gathering into concentrated streams that flowed through the coffin's interior, like ribbons of liquid light. The temperature sensors recorded no change in the surrounding air. This manifestation generated neither heat nor cold. The mist behavior grew more complex with each passing minute. It formed intricate geometric patterns, creating three-dimensional structures that hung suspended in the air. These formations matched no known natural phenomena, their symmetry too perfect to be random, their movements too precise to be explained by air currents or temperature variations. Dr. Patel's instruments detected something extraordinary within the mist structure. The substance appeared to exist partially outside normal spacetime, with particles that occupied multiple positions simultaneously. When she attempted to analyze its composition, the results came back as impossible. The mist somehow contained elements that couldn't exist under known physical laws. The most remarkable transformation occurred when the mist began interacting with the electromagnetic fields already present in the coffin. The two phenomena merged in ways that created new forms of energy, producing readings that caused several monitoring systems to short-circuit. The team scrambled to adjust their equipment, knowing they couldn't risk missing a moment of what was unfolding. As the mist continued to evolve, it developed what appeared to be centers of consciousness, points where the vaporous substance concentrated into denser formations that pulsed with their own inner light. These focal points moved with evident purpose, examining the coffin's interior as if searching for something specific. The audio sensors picked up new frequencies emanating from within the mist itself. Unlike the mechanical tapping or electromagnetic humming from before, these sounds carried harmonic qualities that resembled music, though not any music human ears were meant to hear. The frequencies existed at the very edge of perceivable sound, creating patterns that seemed to encode information in their very vibrations. Visual distortions began appearing wherever the mist concentrated. Space itself appeared to bend around these areas, creating ripples in reality that the cameras struggled to capture. Through these distortions, brief glimpses of something else became visible, spaces or dimensions that existed alongside our own, revealed for split seconds before the ripples closed. The research team watched in awe as the mist began forming more complex structures. Tendrils of vapor wove themselves into lattices of impossible geometry, creating frameworks that seemed to support the weight of something unseen. These structures pulsed with their own inner rhythm, expanding and contracting like the breathing of some vast invisible organism. Most astonishing was the mist's apparent response to conscious observation. When the team focused their attention on particular areas, the mist reacted, altering its behavior in ways that suggested awareness. It was as if the substance could sense not just the electronic eyes of their cameras, but the human consciousness behind them. Dr. Hartman ordered a complete electromagnetic isolation of the monitoring facility, concerned that outside interference might disrupt whatever process was unfolding. The team watched through their screens as the mist continued its mysterious dance, knowing they were witnessing something that challenged every scientific principle they had ever learned. The transformation reached its peak as the mist began coalescing into a central mass. The individual streams and tendrils pulled together, their movement deliberate and coordinated. The resulting form defied description. It was both there and not there, solid yet incorporeal. A paradox made visible through whatever force had manifested within their equipment's view. As dawn approached, the mist's activities intensified. The patterns it created grew more complex, its movements more purposeful. The team could sense they were building towards something, though none could predict what form that culmination might take. The air in the monitoring facility grew thick with anticipation as they watched this unknown phenomenon continue its mysterious performance. Through their screens, they observed as reality itself seemed to twist and bend around the misty manifestation. The boundaries between solid matter and empty space became uncertain, and the very air within the coffin took on properties that should have been impossible. Whatever force had created this phenomenon, it was steadily rewriting the rules of physics within that confined space. The team maintained their vigil, documenting every aspect of the mist's evolution, knowing they were watching something that would forever change humanity's understanding of death, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. As the phenomenon continued to develop, one question resonated through every observer's mind. What would this mysterious force reveal next? The discovery of the empty coffin sent shockwaves through the research facility. The event occurred during what had seemed like a routine data check. One moment, the infrared cameras showed James Porter's body lying peacefully within the coffin, and the next, the space was inexplicably vacant. No alarms had sounded. No sensors had detected any disturbance in the surrounding soil. One of life's most fundamental constants, that physical matter couldn't simply cease to exist, had been defied before their eyes. In those first moments of discovery, Dr. Hartman maintained remarkable composure. She directed her team with measured precision, initiating a comprehensive diagnostic scan of all monitoring systems. Every camera angle was analyzed, every sensor reading scrutinized. The data stream showed no interruption, no glitch, no malfunction that could explain what they had witnessed. The cameras had been recording continuously, yet somehow failed to capture the exact moment of disappearance. What force could have orchestrated such an impossible event leaving behind no trace of its method or purpose. The soil sensors surrounding the coffin revealed another layer of impossibility. The earth remained undisturbed, its carefully measured layers still perfectly in place. No tunnel had been dug, no cavity created. The laws of physics insisted that matter couldn't simply vanish. It had to go somewhere. Yet their instruments, capable of detecting the slightest movement of a single grain of sand, showed absolutely no disturbance in the surrounding earth. Dr. Chen's quantum analysis equipment recorded unprecedented readings during this period. The space within the coffin exhibited characteristics of what she termed localized reality displacement. According to her instruments, the physical space inside the coffin temporarily existed in a state that didn't fully conform to known physical laws. It was as if a bubble of different reality had briefly intercepted their own. The team's attention turned to the coffin itself, which remained physically present and intact. Its inner surfaces bore no marks of disturbance, no signs of force or pressure. The fabric lining remained unwrinkled, as if James's body had dissolved rather than been removed. Only one thing had changed. The wood of the coffin's interior now bore a single line of text, carved with impossible precision. "Why am I here?" The electromagnetic sensors told their own baffling story. In the moments surrounding the disappearance, they recorded energy patterns that formed perfect geometric shapes, structured sequences of power that defied random occurrence. These patterns resembled nothing in their extensive database of known phenomena, yet they carried an undeniable sense of purpose and design. Sarah Patel's atmospheric analysis revealed another layer of strangeness. The air inside the coffin had undergone a fundamental change at the molecular level. Its composition remained technically the same, but the behavior of the molecules had altered in subtle yet significant ways. They moved in patterns that suggested they were responding to laws of physics that didn't quite match those of our universe. The team's audio equipment captured something during this period that would later become the subject of countless debates. Beneath the usual background noise, barely audible even with their sophisticated filtering systems, was what sounded like a voice. Not James's voice, but something else. Something that spoke in frequencies that shouldn't have been possible to record. When analyzed, the sound contained patterns that matched both the electromagnetic geometries and the molecular behavior of the air. Those who were present in the monitoring facility during these events reported experiencing unusual sensations. Some described a feeling of time moving strangely, as if moments were stretching and compressing simultaneously. Others spoke of an overwhelming sense of presence, as if something vast and incomprehensible had briefly turned its attention to their small facility. Dr. Hartman ordered an immediate examination of the backup data stored at their remote locations. The readings were identical across all 3 storage sites, eliminating any possibility of local equipment malfunction. Whatever had occurred had been recorded consistently by multiple independent systems, making it impossible to dismiss as a technical error. The team's efforts to understand what had happened led them down increasingly strange paths of theoretical physics. They found themselves exploring concepts that had previously been confined to the realm of theoretical mathematics. Ideas about dimensional intersections, quantum superposition at a macro scale, and the possibility that consciousness itself might operate outside the constraints of traditional space-time. Attempts to communicate with whatever force had manifested proved both fascinating and frustrating. The team tried various methods: electromagnetic pulses, sound frequencies, even simple written messages displayed on screens within the coffin. While their instruments continued to record unusual phenomena, nothing seemed to elicit a direct response to their efforts at communication. As the hours passed, the team began noticing subtle changes in the empty space where James's body had been. The air there behaved differently than the air around it, as if that specific volume retained some echo of its former occupant. Infrared cameras showed temperature variations that exactly matched the outline of a human form, though no physical body was present to create such patterns. The geological team, led by Dr. Martinez, reported another puzzling discovery. The soil surrounding the coffin had begun exhibiting unusual properties. Though still physically unchanged, it now conducted electricity differently than before. and its magnetic properties had altered in ways that defied explanation. It was as if the Earth itself had been fundamentally changed by whatever force had removed James's body. The coffin itself became an object of intense study. Though James's body had vanished, the space retained unusual properties. Sensitive equipment detected ongoing anomalies, subtle fluctuations in electromagnetic fields, microscopic variations in atomic behavior, and persistent quantum effects that defied explanation. The wooden box had become more than a container. It was now a bridge between known and unknown realms. Could the human mind truly comprehend the implications of what had been witnessed? Or were some mysteries simply beyond our current capacity to understand? Laboratory analysis of materials from the coffin revealed more surprises. The wood had undergone subtle molecular changes, its structure altered in ways that suggested exposure to unknown forces. The fabric lining contained traces of energy patterns that matched no known source. Even the air trapped within the sealed space exhibited unusual properties that persisted long after the main events had concluded. Government agencies began showing interest in the project's implications. Representatives from various departments arrived to assess potential applications and security concerns. The possibility that consciousness could influence physical reality in such dramatic ways raised questions about everything from national security to the nature of human potential. The academic world struggled to integrate these findings into existing theoretical frameworks. New papers appeared daily, proposing various explanations for what had occurred. Conference halls filled with heated debates as scholars attempted to reconcile traditional scientific understanding with the undeniable evidence of something that should have been impossible. Private research facilities around the world began conducting their own experiments, hoping to replicate aspects of the original project. None achieved similar results, but their efforts contributed to a growing body of knowledge about the intersection of consciousness, quantum mechanics, and what some began calling post-physical phenomena. Margaret Porter received letters from people around the world who had lost loved ones. Many shared their own mysterious experiences around death, stories they had previously kept private for fear of ridicule. These accounts formed a tapestry of human experience that suggested James's case, while extreme, might not be entirely unique. Dr. Hartman's team continued their analysis, working through the massive amount of collected data. They discovered subtle patterns that had initially gone unnoticed, correlations between different types of phenomena that suggested an underlying order to what had appeared random. These findings hinted at the existence of natural laws beyond current scientific understanding. The original monitoring facility remained active, though its focus shifted from observation to analysis. The team maintained their vigilant documentation of any continuing phenomena, while also working to understand the vast amount of information already collected. Their work expanded beyond pure science into philosophy, consciousness studies, and the nature of reality itself. As weeks passed, the immediate sensation began to fade, but the deeper implications remained. The scientific community found itself facing fundamental questions about the nature of existence, consciousness, and the boundaries between life and death. What had begun as an unprecedented experiment had evolved into something more, a challenge to humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The aftermath continued to unfold in unexpected ways, touching lives far beyond the immediate circle of those involved. It sparked new areas of research, inspired artistic expressions, and prompted millions to reconsider their assumptions about life's greatest mystery. In seeking to document the end of one man's journey, they had instead opened a door to questions that would resonate through generations to come. Dr. Eleanor Hartman's reflection on the experiment emerged gradually, like pieces of a puzzle slowly coming together. In the quiet moments between the endless meetings and debriefings, she began documenting her thoughts in a personal journal, trying to make sense of what she and her team had witnessed. Her office, once filled with scientific journals and research papers, now held something far more precious: the handwritten accounts of a scientist grappling with the impossible. The weight of the experience had changed her in profound ways. Her colleagues noticed the difference in her demeanor. The once strictly empirical scientist now paused more often, considering possibilities that would have seemed absurd just months before. During late nights in her office, surrounded by data printouts and analysis reports, she found herself drawn to questions that transcended traditional scientific inquiry. Her private notes revealed a deepening appreciation for the mystery they had encountered. She wrote about the moment James disappeared, not in the clinical language of their official reports, but with a sense of wonder that brought the event to life. The way the air had seemed to hold its breath, the strange quality of light that their instruments barely captured, the feeling that they had witnessed something both ending and beginning simultaneously. The experience had forced her to confront her own beliefs about consciousness and reality. As a scientist, she had always sought concrete explanations, measurable data, and reproducible results. But what they had witnessed defied such neat categorization. The phenomena they recorded suggested that consciousness itself might be far more fundamental to reality than anyone had imagined. Her relationship with Margaret Porter evolved beyond the professional boundaries she usually maintained. The two women found themselves sharing long conversations about life, death, and the nature of existence. Margaret's quiet acceptance of the extraordinary events provided a perspective that balanced Hartman's scientific analysis with profound human insight. During one particularly memorable evening, as they reviewed the final recordings from the Coffin, Dr. Hartman shared something she had never included in the official reports. A moment of connection she felt with James just before his disappearance. It wasn't something she could quantify or measure, but the sensation had been undeniable, as if his consciousness had briefly touched everyone present in the monitoring facility. The impact on her team became another focus of her reflection. She observed how the experience had transformed each of them, breaking down the barriers between objective observation and subjective experience. Their weekly meetings evolved into deep discussions about the nature of reality, consciousness, and the possibility that human awareness might extend far beyond what science had previously considered. Her academic colleagues responded to her transformed perspective with mixed reactions. Some dismissed her new insights as a departure from scientific rigor. Others, particularly those who had worked closely with consciousness studies, saw in her experience validation for theories they had long pondered but feared to voice in professional circles. The pressure to provide conventional explanations mounted as more prestigious institutions demanded answers. Yet Hartman stood firm in her conviction that what they had witnessed deserved more than reductionist interpretations. In her journal, she wrote about the courage required to admit that some phenomena might lie beyond current scientific understanding while still maintaining the discipline to study them systematically. Her dreams during this period took on new significance. She found herself recording them with the same precision she had once reserved for laboratory observations. The geometric patterns that had appeared in the Coffin began showing up in her nighttime visions, along with insights that seemed to come from somewhere beyond her conscious mind. The project's anonymous donor reached out to her personally, not through intermediaries, as before. Their conversation, conducted through encrypted channels, revealed a deeper purpose behind the experiment, one that aligned with ancient wisdom traditions while pushing the boundaries of modern science. The donor's identity remained hidden, but their understanding of what the team had witnessed suggested knowledge that went far beyond conventional scientific thinking. Public speaking engagements took on new meaning as Hartman found ways to communicate their discoveries without compromising their complexity. She developed a unique ability to bridge the gap between rigorous scientific observation and the profound implications of their findings. Her presentations became sought-after events, drawing audiences from both scientific and philosophical communities. Her relationship with time itself seemed to shift. The linear progression of cause and effect that had once seemed so fundamental to scientific understanding now appeared more flexible, more open to possibility. She found herself considering whether consciousness might operate outside the constraints of conventional time, creating connections across what humans perceived as past, present, and future. The technical data from the experiment took on new meanings as she reviewed it through this expanded perspective. Patterns emerged that suggested underlying connections between seemingly separate phenomena. The electromagnetic fluctuations, quantum anomalies, and consciousness effects began to look less like isolated events and more like different aspects of a single unified process. Personal challenges arose as she struggled to integrate her experience into her everyday life. Simple activities took on new significance. The play of light through leaves, the patterns in flowing water, the way thoughts seemed to ripple through consciousness. She found herself noticing details that had always been present, but had somehow escaped her scientific attention. Her final paper on the experiment departed from traditional scientific format. While maintaining rigorous documentation of their observations, she included sections on the philosophical implications of their findings and the potential need for new scientific paradigms. The paper generated controversy in academic circles, but also opened doors to new ways of thinking about consciousness research. As the months passed, Dr. Hartman's reflection deepened into something more than mere scientific analysis. She began to see their experiment as part of a larger pattern in human understanding, a moment when the boundaries between known and unknown, between observer and observed, had briefly dissolved to reveal possibilities that would take generations to fully comprehend. The question that had appeared in the empty coffin, "Why am I here?" took on new meaning in her contemplation. It became not just an artifact of their experiment, but a fundamental inquiry into the nature of consciousness itself. Her ongoing work transformed into a search not just for answers, but for better questions about the nature of existence. Each day brought new insights as she continued to process the magnitude of what they had witnessed. The scientific community might debate their findings for decades to come, but Eleanor Hartman knew with certainty that their experiment had opened a door that could never truly be closed. A door that led to a deeper understanding of not just death, but of life and consciousness itself. In the end, what happened in that coffin remains one of science's most profound mysteries. James Porter's final gift to humanity opened doors we never knew existed, challenging our understanding of life, death, and consciousness itself. From those first curious moments to the inexplicable disappearance, his story reminds us that some questions are worth asking, even if we're not ready for the answers. What would you do if given the chance to peer beyond the veil? Perhaps the real mystery isn't what lies beyond death, but what lies within ourselves. If this journey into the unknown captivated you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this exploration of life's greatest mystery.